my name is Tan Mai Sai. I'm a senior product manager at Zynga, and what I'll be talking about today is how to optimize your pricing. So this is after you've come up with your base pricing for your products. How do you go about making sure it's priced correctly, and how to get the most out of your users, and how to make sure your LTVs are high and your product remains steady and grows. So what are we going to exactly talk about today? First part is, why do we actually want to optimize pricing? Secondly, how do we come up with our base pricing? And after we do that, how do we convert our users into payers? And once we have a bunch of payers, how do we find valuable clusters in our payers? And once we find these clusters, we'll talk about how to give special offers based on different segments. And after you've segmented your players, how can we personalize these offers to increase purchasing and to overall increase our product's revenues? So first of all, why is it important to optimize pricing? The big keyword to remember here is LTV, a user's lifetime value. This is something you should want to constantly increase in your products, and this in turn increases your revenue and helps you grow your products. The ways we'll talk about doing this is by retaining your payers and by reactivating your lapsed payers. If someone was actually paying in your product before and then stopped, how can you reactivate them? How to convert new users into players, and how to convert active users into remaining active users, or upselling them into becoming even higher spenders. So we'll talk about how to increase purchasing by doing all four of these actions. So first, let's talk about how to determine base pricing. This talk is not about base pricing at all, but I want to set a base background for how we actually come up with what price points to offer in the first place. The easiest way to do this is to compare it to an existing competing product. For example, Candy Crush is a very popular game you may have heard of, where you match 3 items on a board, and that gives you some reward and you level up to the next level. So Zynga released a new game that is very similar to Candy Crush with a different theme. And as you can see, our buy pages for Candy Crush and the Zynga game look almost similar. They have the same items, the same types of currencies, and they're similar price points. So this is kind of setting the expectation for players that if you've played Candy Crush, you'll find similar things in this game as well. And it's likely that players who play other match 3 games will also play and purchase in your current game. If you're first to market and you don't have any competing products, look for signals in existing similar products. For example, there's a lot of new machine learning SaaS companies coming up. They may not necessarily have competing products yet, but they can look for signals in something like previous BI tools and previous analytics platforms like Amplitude or Mixpanel, and look at their pricing strategies and try to make sure their products have a competing strategy as well. And the last way you can do this is by asking your potential users. That's the easiest way to do it, is to find a potential user for your product, ask them what value they see in this and how much they'd be willing to pay, offer them some price points. But the easiest and the most effective way is to compare to competing products and look for signals to make your product competitive as well. So let's jump into how to convert your users into payers. So there's multiple examples in different ways that freemium products will convert your users into payers. And actually, in most products, a very small population of your active users actually convert into payers. So it's very important to optimize the small percentage of population into building giant companies. For example, as you can see on this chart, Google Drive actually only converts 0.5% of their users into payers, yet they're making a lot of money. And same with Dropbox, they only convert 4%, but they're a giant company. One of the best SaaS companies these days for conversion is actually Slack at 30%, and that's from 3 months ago, so it may have even gone up, I'm not sure. But it's still a very small percent actually of their population is actually non-paying users. So the key here in all of these products is that you want to lock premium content behind a paywall and make sure the premium content is valuable enough for your users to want to convert into paying customers. So here are some popular techniques to convert that work really well. Spotify does a free trial and a freemium model where they have a bunch of users who can use Spotify for free and have ads, whereas you can try a premium version without ads. You can have offline music, and they give you multiple skips and other premium content. But if you want to try premium, you have to either pay, or you can also try the premium with a free trial on top of the freemium model. Another one is giving discounted time periods. This is common with Blue Apron, HelloFresh type companies where they'll give you first 3 meals free, and this is sometimes spread out over 3 months. So you can have a discount for 3 months, and then you go back to regular rate. Or you see this in website service providers like Bluehost. The first year is a discounted rate, and then you go back to normal rates. And the last one, which is very common in games and consumer products, is a very special package of offer for only new users. So you can see here, there's a 99-cent package that you'll never see again unless you convert as a new user right now. So the key takeaway here is to try to hook your users in with special sales. New users who are not payers yet should be treated differently than mature users. You don't want to give everyone the same price point. It's better to get new users converted at a discounted rate for longer user LTVs, right? So it's better to give them discounts as much as you can so you can get them converted. And once they're converted, then you can try monetizing them more. So how do you optimize this conversion? Here's a very common technique in games, and I've seen 1 or 2 other non-gaming products use it. But something that's very valuable in products is to segment your users by age since install. For example, if someone has been active for 7 days versus active for 14 days, give them different conversion values and escalate this value provided by your product. So here's an example of an experiment we ran where if you had installed a game for 3 days, we gave you a $3 package for $1. And then between 3 and 7 days, we gave you a $5 package for $2. And between 7 and 14, we gave you a $10 package for $3. So we kept escalating the price, but we also kept escalating the value you're getting at these price points. So you keep getting a better and better deal till you actually convert. And once you convert, then it's easy to hook them in to keep around and retain them in your product and keep purchasing in the future. So the key takeaway here is figure out your product's conversion age values, bucket your users by install age, and try to convert them based on this install age, and test different values. This is one example of how we tried it, but we've tried 50 different variations of this to see which escalation actually works best for our users. How do you optimize this conversion even further? So one common technique to use is to analyze your user behavior of users who do convert and compare those two who don't. So I'm going to go through an example of a game, and you can apply this to your own products later on to see how your user behavior differs. So for example, in a game, 80% of payers convert within 7 days. So majority of our conversion happens in the first 7 days if you install a game. So what I did was I cohorted users who converted in 7 days to become a purchaser, and users who didn't convert in 7 days since install, and put them in different cohort. And I looked at our key metrics and the differences between the 2 key metrics. The users who did convert played 50 times in 7 days, whereas those who didn't only played 10 times. Users who converted had a higher return value in the game for them, whereas users who didn't have a high return value. Users who converted had 20 friends, while the ones who didn't had only 2 friends. So from this type of data, we can create some hypotheses. We thought maybe if we gave players more free credit when they joined, the players who were only able to play 10 times would be able to actually play 50 times. We try to incentivize adding more friends and recommending more friends, so that because our hypothesis was that maybe if you add more friends in your game, you're more likely to come back and chat with your friends in the game. So we started optimizing how people made friends. And this in turn kind of helps us increase our conversion, because you're creating the same environment that leads to conversion of a new user. So in your SaaS products as well, figure out what are the user steps people are taking before they actually convert, And how can you make sure the people who don't convert are also able to take those same steps? Are you enabling them to actually become a payer? Are you providing them the same value as the ones who do convert? So these are kind of things to test in your product and optimize over time to make sure you're increasing your product's payer conversion. So the key takeaway here again is optimize your product's conversion by comparing behavior of converted pairs and non-pairs in the same time frame since they install, and then track their usage steps and user behaviors and figure out what's actually missing in the group who is not converting. So now that you've converted a bunch of pairs, let's look at what we can do with how to monetize more with the pairs you already have. So all pairs are not created equally, and we'll see why. So I'm going to go through some examples how in games how we cluster some of our pairs, and then we'll talk about how you can cluster your pairs and some ideas on how to start clustering. So one common cluster in games is that we call is couponers and non-couponers. So couponers are pairs who only purchase when we have special sales in our game, and non-couponers are those who purchase regardless of any sales, that purchase all the time. And this really helps us kind of optimize our game and figure out how to target these different users, and we'll get into targeting them later. So here's one of our common clusters, and we found this by just segmenting our data and looking for statistically significant clusters. Another example of clustering that we do is by spending amount. So we call some pairs fish, and these are people who have just spent less than some amount of dollars that we determine. And then we have whales who spend between two amounts that we think is another big segment. And then we have super whales, who are users who spend over a significant amount that we consider them to be our key paying segment. So determine significant clusters of paying user spend amounts in your product, and this can also kind of help you get started with clustering and seeing what are the different common clusters. Another way we cluster in games is by engagement level. So there are pairs who are very low engaged. These people are playing, but they only come into your game once a week and play. There are medium engagement players who are performing your key action, but they're only coming in 3 times a week. And then there are highly engaged pairs who are users who come into your product every day, and they're performing these key actions every single day. And then the last, our key cluster of pairs is things we talked about: new pairs, active pairs, and lapsed pairs. New pairs are recently converted users. Active pairs are pairs who are purchasing frequently, and lapsed pairs are someone who has stopped purchasing. So this is kind of how we cluster our pairs in our game, and I hope that gave you some ideas, but let's talk about how to cluster your pairs. So clusters are very product dependent. Some of these couponers and non-couponers may not apply to your product. So look for key actions in your game, and these are usually tied to your core action. If you are this product manager for Dropbox, and your core action is that you want people to be uploading and sharing files, look for actions that indicate, look for these actions in your pair segments and see what is a medium engaged pair, what is a low engaged pair, for example. And look for pair spend segments. Find significant enough clusters for different spend amounts and look for statistically significant groups. What I mean by that is figure out what are your price ranges of different pair segments. So I mentioned we talk about, we have fish, whales, and super whales. What is this for your product? And figure out who those pairs are. And then look for when your pairs are actually spending. Do they spend after they do a particular action in the game? Do they spend or in your product, or do they spend after only on certain days of the week? Look for different habits and different behavior, and partner with your data analyst or data scientist and try to figure out these different segments and have these clusters ready to analyze. And one other common way of how you can cluster your pairs is by age and product. So you can check to see spending habits of your users by product age. Has someone been using your product for 30 days? And is their paying behavior different than someone who's been using for 60 days? and how is that different for someone who's been using it for 3 years, right? So look for these kind of signals and data to figure out how you can cluster your payers for your own product. So the key takeaway here is you have to cluster your payers. You can't treat them all the same way. Find valuable segments, and optimizing these valuable segments is the key to optimizing your revenue. So make sure next time you're looking at it, figure out what your clusters are and then segment them. So now that you do have your, let's say you have your pair clusters, you figured out which different groups are, what do you do with them? In games, what we do is we give segmented price offerings based on our clusters. I mentioned couponers. These are players who only purchase during sales. So one feature to build on top of that, what we did was we put a short time limit on the sale to increase urgency of purchasing. So if we were giving them a sale, a 50% sale over a weekend, we put a short time limit. We said 50% sale only for 3 hours, go into your game and purchase now. And we saw an increase in purchasing. For whales and super whales, we just give them higher offerings since that's what they buy. If they're always buying a $100 game package, there is no point in giving them a $50 package ever, right? So we just keep giving them higher offerings. For highly engaged users, we gave them special offers right after they performed a key action that we think helps them convert. For lapsed payers, we treat these like almost like our new users, and we give them increasing value of sales to make them active again. So if someone has stopped spending and they used to see value in your product, do anything to get them back, right? Because they'll start seeing value again. How can you use this kind of segmentation and tune for your cohorts, especially in SaaS products? So determine features that would enhance the experience for your key segments that you figured out in your previous clusters. And the features that should be tuned to the cohorts based on your findings about their behavior. So don't give special coupons to someone who is highly engaged. So don't mix your different clusters together. Build your features based on what you found and based on the main motivation behind why they're purchasing a certain thing. And determine what actions would most likely retain your payers and convert. So if you have these cohorts and you're segmenting them based on these different clusters you found, and make sure you're giving them the correct features so you can retain them, so they're having a good user experience. This should never come at the expense of your user's experience. And it's crucial to test and tune your features several times. When we did all these different experiments, we tried different time limits on couponers, for example. When we gave whales higher offerings, we made sure we A/B tested them also getting lower offerings to make sure we're not taking away from the user experience, that they're still being retained while we're experimenting with these segmented price offerings. So you want to make sure you're testing these optimizations several times because it's pretty key to figuring out what the actual price point is. So don't treat all your pairs the same way. Determine the motivation behind why they became a pair and build your features for that key intent. Don't build the wrong features for the wrong cohort. Give the correct features to the correct cohort. It may sound very obvious, but there are times I've seen where features are built and shipped to everyone and not to a specific cluster that you built the feature for. So now that we've segmented and found our clusters, let's take segmentation to the next level. And by this, what I mean is personalized offerings. Customization and personalization are not new concepts, right? So Facebook customizes your news feed, Spotify gives you personalized recommendations, Netflix gives you recommendations, Yelp, Google, and I could name hundreds of other companies doing recommendation and personalization right now. So since we do get customized and personalized content, we should be able to apply the same principles to price offerings, right? And this is what we do currently at Zynga, and in many games actually, but I have not seen this very commonly in other products. So here are some examples that I want to give you. So for example, if a user's average purchase in our game is $50 and they're always purchasing $50 packages, then we don't show them offers below $50. We use this information to upsell. So we may give them a special sale on an item that's actually $75 and see if they can convert at that price point. And by doing this, we can increase their user LTV. And if a user tends to buy every 4 days, then we give them an offer every 4 days. If there's a user who engages with a particular feature and they end up purchasing some product, we keep showing them that product at the time of their action. For example, we found that after making 10 moves in one of the Zynga games, a player ended up purchasing a hint. And this is an example for words with friends. The data is made up, so don't trust the actual numbers. So what we ended up doing was, after making every 10 moves, we ended up showing them an offer of their average purchase price from the previous from their previous purchases. For SaaS products, you can also apply similar principles. You can determine likelihood of when a user will become a customer, and you can figure out what kind of price point is likely for them to convert and show them exactly that price point. These examples are examples that are relevant to games in our products. So figure out what these metrics are in your products. What are your key metrics, and how you can use these metrics to find likelihood of conversion. And this is a big data science project, essentially, right? So figure out when what different user behaviors convert at which price points, and target it on a user level. So the key takeaway here is learn from user behavior, test different values, and customize them on a user level, not just finding clusters and giving different segments different features based on what they like, but also customize price points on a different user level and give a user value specific to them. And this is where testing is key. We're constantly running experiments to test these values a lot. And after doing multiple iterations and several experiments is when we can figure out what's an actual algorithm to that's actually creating a good user experience and offering a price that will increase our revenue. So keep that goal in mind of increasing your user LTVs and revenue, but also do not compromise your user experience. So let's talk about the entire presentation and what the key takeaways are. So we started with how do we increase revenue by retaining your payers, by reactivating your lapsed payers, by converting new users into payers, and keep converting your active users. First, you want to convert them by hooking them in. Use different techniques I talked about, or you can use any other popular techniques that you see in the market, but you also want to use an escalating offer to make sure you can definitely get your users to convert. So keep pushing them till the point they actually want to convert into a pair. Once you have enough pairs, cluster your data and find your key segments. And this is very product dependent. I gave you some examples of how we find this in game, but apply this to your products. Find key segments and try to segment by your pairs by age, by their spending amount, by their spending behavior, and see where you can find significant clusters. And then once you find these clusters, tune your pricing for these different segments based on what you found in your clusters. So you don't have to have the same pricing for everybody in your product. Have different pricing for different people. And then the last part is personalize these offers based on behavior and patterns on a user level. Make sure you're not just targeting different segments with different price points, but you're also giving special limited time offers based on a user level number. Try to upsell your products, try to increase your revenue, try to increase your LTVs by personalizing. And by doing all of these steps, you should be able to increase your user LTVs and keep your users around because you're giving them price points and offerings that they actually like and would actually likely convert them. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning about what we do at Zynga and how you can also apply to SaaS products or any products in general. And thank you for listening to my talk. And if you have any questions, you can connect with me on social media on LinkedIn or Twitter, and let me know if you have any specific questions about any of these or any comments or concerns. Thank you.